I mean, the Phillips Schofield case was an example of this, insofar as he was arguing forcefully that the person he was accused of being involved with was over 18. But there was still a sort of 30-year age gap and a massive disparity of power. And this is a massive issue for our society at large.
Hello and welcome to Catholic Unscripted. I'm Katherine Bennett.
I'm Mark Lambert.
And joining us today is Matt Fradd's friend, Jacob Phillips. Hi.
Thanks for having me on.
You're very welcome. Dr. Jacob Phillips, I should say, friend of the show, and you've joined us before, Jacob, a couple of times. You're a professor at St Mary's Catholic University in South London and have just very recently appeared on Matt Fradd's Pints with Aquinas, hence the Matt's friend. So yes. Thank you for that. That was good. We enjoyed that.
Yeah, I'm back on home turf now, so this is good.
Yeah, back with the Brits. Good. Well, exactly. we wanted to speak with you. Well, how can we put this? So we covered a mass at Holy Apostles in Pimlico earlier this week, and it was the 50th anniversary mass in Thanksgiving for this couple, this same-sex couple, Julian and Martin. And we've had a number of responses to that. It's gone far and wide, and the video of the event has actually been taken down from the Holy Apostles website. If I just start, Jacob, because we'd like your take on it as a theologian. Let me tell you some of the feedback we've had, because it's been quite polarized. Some people have contacted us to say we've never seen anything like it. We've never heard of anyone starting mass with a speech. The gospel seemed like pantomime. We've had, why do you hate gay people? Do you want gay people to commit mass suicide? So we've had some very emotional responses from hurt and pain from traditional, faithful, Orthodox Catholics who were offended by the mass, and hurt and pain from some people who experience same-sex attraction who were hurt by the criticism and commentary. So it's definitely a really difficult topic to address. So we're coming to you, Jacob, to ask for your view, I suppose. First of all, your impressions on the mass, and then what you think people would say who have been in favour of it are the theological grounds for this kind of thing, and why we might be able to, how we might analyse that.
Sure. So the way the mass was presented, the speech at the beginning particularly, and obviously having a cardinal of the church preach the homily, some of which I'd hope to touch on later. Obviously, it's putting a flag in the sand in a particular position. And it had, the opening speech had I suppose, a narrative of progress. We're moving towards a point of what would be called in certain circles full inclusion. And I'm not, I obviously I disagree with that narrative, and I agree with the position that Mark articulated in that video about human sexuality as it's understood in the Catholic Church, which doesn't align with what was presented. Now we can talk about how they've got to what was presented, but I think we just need to start with the points which Mark articulated wonderfully in the original video, but you always have to start at the beginning here. Human desire is orientated to God. We're created in order to share in the beatific vision. Human sexual desire is particularly precious to God because it's unique in having the capacity to be the site of his creative work and creating a human soul out of nothing, which is a miraculous property which belongs to God alone and is to be celebrated and treated as sacred. And in reflection of that sacred and remarkable miraculous power by which God can work through human sexuality, the only permitted way in which point at which to share human sexuality is within the nuptial union. So that's the Catholic position. People often ask me, what does the Catholic Church say about gay people? And I sometimes say nothing really. And I just say something like I've just said. Because what that means is other ways of expressing human sexuality are not permitted. And there's a huge range of ways of expressing human sexuality: premarital sex, adultery, masturbation, all the rest of it. It's all there. It's all, there's a million and one ways in which to express it, all of which fall short of what the Catholic Church teaches. So I would go so far as to say I don't think the Church actually has. Its position on homosexuality is secondary. The position is on human sexuality and the divine plan as the site of God's creative work. Now, we all know, being human, that human sexual desire is one of the most frequent areas that people struggle to manage and to handle. And I'm sure in the confessional, particularly with men and young men in this day and age, I'm sure that there's evidence of that. So what the Catholic Church teaches is a way in which to bring that most intense and at times bewildering and sometimes misleading intense human sexual desire into a way in which it can be appropriately expressed in light of God, and cannot bring the sort of disruption and troubles which it causes in very many lives. And I don't, when I work with young people, and I've had many conversations with people who are really in the middle of all of this stuff, like really in the middle of it. And I've had people say to me in various contexts, it's really difficult being gay and being Catholic. It's really difficult being homosexual and being Catholic. And I agree, it must be. But I say honestly, and people will laugh at this, but I say honestly, it's quite difficult being heterosexual and Catholic, actually. It's quite hard. It does require a lot of you, actually, to fulfill that Catholic vision that I just expressed within marriage, including contraception, including IVF. Many heterosexuals struggle with what the Catholic Church teaches on human sexuality, by which I mean they find it very difficult to adhere to it, and they frequently find themselves in the confessional because they failed to do so. It's actually part of being Catholic, because human sexual desire has always been very closely proximate to concupiscence and sin. It's just a reality. It's a reality for everyone in the Church. So, nothing that we say, or nothing I say, one would hope in this would want to be singling out any particular group who have any particular issue. We've all had issues with human sexuality. It's part of being human and trying to be Catholic in a world which has a very different view of sexuality.
I think that's a really important point, isn't it, Mark? That there's not a monopoly on cross carrying. We all in various ways have our cross to carry. And I have no doubt whatsoever that it is incredibly hard for people who experience same-sex attraction and have done throughout their lives to adhere to expectations which find them in a position where they feel they cannot live out that, what they see as that desire, that instinct. I have no doubt it's incredibly hard. That is not in question. I don't think that's in question at all. But it does, doesn't it also, Jacob, sort of a mass like this, a celebration like this, talk of moving forward and progressing and change is a bit of a slap in the face to the many, many Catholics who do live who do live a chaste life, who try to adhere to what Christ calls of them, despite the very great difficulty of experiencing same-sex attraction. And then they watch something like this and they must think, well, why do we bother? There's a cardinal there, there's bishops there endorsing this change.
Yeah, and it's a really live issue in the Church and in society at large, really. I mean, as was mentioned in the video you did, strictly speaking, it's not right within a Catholic purview to speak of homosexuality as an identity, because our identity is being made in the image of God. Someone's expression of sexuality is never their identity as such. So it was, prior to the Francis pontificate, language of LGBT or LGBT plus had never been in the magisterial document. It has since then made its way into a magisterial document, but I personally felt that was muddying the waters a little bit, because it's understood by society to be core to identity, and people who are themselves same-sex attracted outside the Church do argue very strongly that they consider it part of their identity, and that's their experience. But within the Church, that's explicitly not the case, which is why language of same-sex attraction I think is more helpful for the people you mention, because you're distinguishing between the attraction and the reality of who the person is, and you're also distinguishing between the attraction and the acting out of the attraction. And this is a nuance which is lost completely in society at large. So Tim Farron lost his job famously, I think, or certainly had a really hard time in the media because he was asked, do you think gay sex is a sin? And nobody asked the question of whether he was asking that being gay is a sin, which strictly speaking, in the Catholic Church, I don't think you can say being gay is a sin. But engaging with action which is directed towards human procreation without a procreative end is a sin. And I know that's a nuance that won't satisfy many people, but it's very important for people who experience what's phrased in the Catechism as deep-seated same-sex attraction, such that it's always been there. It says in the Catechism that it's existed in a variety of forms through the centuries in different cultures. Its psychological genesis remains largely unexplained. That's very interesting language because it's admitting that for many people who have what it called deep-seated same-sex attraction, it's been with them as long as they can remember, which is why it feels core to identity. And it also acknowledges in the Catechism, I've got it here, the number of men and women who have deep-seated homosexual tendencies is not negligible, i.e. it's very, very widespread, for reasons which, again, are mysterious, because it doesn't seem to have been quite so widespread in previous eras, as far as we know. So we're in this situation where lots of people need to hear that being gay is not a sin, but engaging in sexual activity geared towards procreation without a procreative end is forbidden by the Catholic Church. And that I think that nuance is extremely helpful for people. Now, I do not think that nuance would have been welcomed had someone voiced it at the event that we're here to discuss. What was presented there was a different narrative which has come up more recently, in which language of inclusion and acceptance is given an unconditional theological approval, because Jesus was infinitely compassionate, infinitely welcoming, and took an irresistible fondness in other people in a way that people just couldn't forget. And this is sort of lazily superimposed onto us having this attitude towards all people, of course, leaving to one side the fact that when Jesus says, "Follow me," there's a cross attached, and the cross is different. As he says this in Luke, everyone has their own cross, pre-measured, bespoke, oven ready, as Boris Johnson would say. And I know the three of us could articulate our own personal crosses, and that this is just the nature of following Christ. And it's important to state for those that are struggling with all this and watch your videos and don't know where they stand and are confused about it all, that there are groups out there which are focused on the support for people undergoing same-sex attraction, and at the same time caught up in the wonder and mystery of the Catholic faith. So one group I'm aware of is called Courage. It's in the States. I'm sure there are equivalent groups here. I believe some Franciscans of the Renewal are involved in that group. And it's on its website, it has lots of good material for working your way through this. But it maintains that nuance I've just discussed, and that nuance which affects the people who felt a slap in the face from this. If you were to compare that group with, for example, the statement that was made by the LGBT plus Westminster group after the document came out from Synod Group 9, the difference is really clear. That the latter group, LGBT plus, I can't remember the proper name, they are suggesting that this is a massive step forward to the way to quote unquote full inclusion. That group Courage I just mentioned are actually singled out as problematic in the Synod Group 9 document. So that nuance has been lost within the church often. So we've got this narrative of full inclusion, inevitable progress. And coincidentally, this goes right to a core issue in the British legal system at the moment, insofar as I think that the bill to ban conversion therapy has gone forward. Or it's certainly been under discussion a lot in recent years. And I think what Courage do, offering support groups for people experiencing same-sex attraction, in which the support is there in order to help you not perform a procreative act without procreation as the end, or an act ordered to procreation, they would probably be classed in the British legal system as problematic in terms of fostering conversion away from homosexuality. And it's really frustrating that this language of conversion therapy being banned has entered our lexicon here in the UK, because it's actually not. Nobody would ban conversion which went in the other direction. if someone came and said, I have these urges, 95% of psychotherapists and counsellors will tell you you've got to act on them. You've got to, otherwise you'll be mentally unwell. So you can actually convert in one direction, you just can't convert in the other. And I think that's something that people need to be aware of as well.
I think that this is the heart of the problem, is that we're in a situation where our society now considers this, for some reason, it's become a kind of shibboleth. And it's something that you can't question. It's something that you're not even allowed really to talk about. And I suppose what's at the core of that, Jacob, is the idea that you can't avoid how you're born. You can't avoid who you're attracted to, and that for some people, if you're, once we've removed the procreative and unitive ends of marriage, that whole argument was taken out of the public sphere at the Lambert conference in 1930, wasn't it? So what you end up with then is a situation where the unitive ends of marriage are the dominant ends of marriage, and therefore, if that is the situation, then anything goes, basically, doesn't it? Like you can't criticize any kind of sexual activity.
Yeah, and you're right. It begins with the Lambert Conference in 1930 on contraception, where the Church of England were the first Christian group to permit the use of contraception on those grounds, separating the procreative and the unitive. And Rowan Williams, who in many ways is a fine theologian, former Anglican Archbishop of Canterbury, he based his argument for full inclusion on the outcome of the 1930 Lambert Conference. I mean, he said that this is the choice the Anglican Church made, and this is the inevitable outcome of it, which he saw as a good thing. It's what many in the Catholic sphere would have been saying, that the two are interlinked, and that would have a very different view on the outcome of that. But you're right about the way it is in the public sphere. I mean, I would say it's up there with the biggest taboo of the Catholic faith now, I would say. And I know many people watching this will be in the secular workplace and will know how deep that taboo goes. And I would hope that if this can be of use to anyone, articulating the vision of Catholic sexuality in the way that we're doing here, and that you did in your previous video, can help people in being able to speak honestly when they're asked to give an answer for their position without seeming hateful. I mean, it's really not in any way hateful at all. From within a Catholic perspective, it's the most loving response. And Katherine gave a very actually quite moving testimony about how being received in love without an honest response to the faults of one's life would have actually detracted from the love that's involved in that reception.
Does it stem, though, Jacob, from a false understanding of what love is? That's how it seems to me. Like our society, so the societal understanding now of love is basically sexual intimacy. That's the way that we understand it. And obviously it's been moving in that direction. I often think about this, the way that even fantastic, like 1950s songs were about making love and stuff like, it sort of put it in people's minds that this was a positive thing. And even though movies and TV was, with Katherine and I were talking about this yesterday about like, you and I probably grew up with James Bond, watching James Bond, jumping in and out of bed with, and like Katherine was saying, okay, but it wasn't like the pornographic stuff that we see today, right? It wasn't, but it's like that aspirational thing is sort of fed into and even things I'd say, like when I was a kid, page 3 of The Sun, I don't know if it still has it, had a topless lady on it. So it's putting sexuality as one of the most like core things. And then you're constantly thinking about, like, it's like, if you ponder on these things all the time, if this is the focus, and if you think this is the most important thing in your life, is pursuing a sexual goal, then it's little wonder that it becomes the center of everything, and what we're saying is make something else the center. Don't make this your idol. Make something else the center. Make God the center. And the Catholic understanding of love is sacrifice. Yeah. It's sacrifice for someone else. It's putting someone else at the center of your life so that you're prepared to do anything that you can for the best outcome for that person, isn't it? Whether that's, and that can be equally a child, you know, your husband or wife, you know, your mother or father, and it's the distinctions between those different kinds of love that is much more fully understood within the Catholic schema, really, isn't it?
Yeah, completely. And in a world in which sexual intimacy is considered, or sharing sexual intimacy with another, or even with oneself, to be fair, in society at large, is seen as an unequivocal good. And we all saw some of the dubious materials that have been used in relationship and sex education, which go so far as to say the expression of sexual intimacy with yourself is a good. It's an unequivocal good, and you're encouraged to do it. What then happens in that society is the morality is provided by the notion of consent. Now, consent is a very important part of sexual morality, don't get me wrong. Nothing can take away from that. But consent alone, as Jordan Peterson has pointed out, would suggest that anybody who's willing to have, you should have sex with anybody who's willing to have sex with you. If that's the only morality involved, it means you should offer yourself to anybody who offers themselves to you.
But consent is necessary and sufficient.
Exactly. So then the big issues around morality and the expression of sexual desire become around consent, and what people have realized in recent years is the whole discussion around this has got much more complicated. Is actually someone can give consent where they don't want to give consent, and legally how difficult that is. And then there's issues around at what age someone's responsibly able to give consent. And people have really struggled. I mean, the Phillips case was an example of this, insofar as he was arguing forcefully that the person he was accused of being involved with was over 18. But there was still a sort of 30-year age gap and a massive disparity of power. And this is a massive issue for our society at large, because the consent, rather than being necessary but not sufficient, is that right? You chest me on my Aristotle here, Katherine. Necessary but not sufficient means that there's other things involved in whether or not it's the right thing to do, which is basically, you know, the Catholic position in terms, so far as what makes it the right thing to do is to do with nuptiality and procreation, etc., etc.
But it's sacred.
Exactly, yeah.
And if you look at what the repercussions of all this are in society, is a disaster. Like, you know, it's like we all know how damaging abuse is. Like, that's really what you're talking about with the consent issue. We see that, and people, it's the last remaining thing, really, the last remaining moral barrier, isn't it? Is abuse, that people still condemn you out, you know, condemn people for, and and yet we're unable to recognise that this is all tied together. The breakdown of the family, the increase in abortion rates. And that really is the contrast between the Catholic vision, which is, it's not saying that a man can't love another man, you know, because you can, or a woman can't love another woman, but it's saying what that love should constitute is not that you're prepared, or that it doesn't facilitate your using them for your sexual gratification. It means that you are prepared to lay down your life for that other person.
Yeah. So in the Anglican Church, which has gone down the road of full inclusion, what people say about this argument about instrumentalization, which you did really well in that video the other day. So if you take away procreation, the degree of self-offering is immediately removed. So you're not completely offering yourself to the other person in a state of, potentially massively life-transforming vulnerability, i.e. becoming a parent, that the other person become a means to the end of your sexual pleasure alone, and it leads to instrumentalization, and ultimately very often leads, and I don't know any person in current society who wouldn't agree, it clearly very often leads to degrading behavior.
Yeah.
But the reality is there are lots of people out there, gay couples, who deny that and say it doesn't apply. And the Anglican Church, you know, argued that the testimony of experience was different, and that if those relationships are held in a position that's monogamous and faithful and stable, that they shouldn't be judged in that way. Now, the Catholic Church aren't saying, therefore, that those people. It's not suggesting, there's no campaigning from anyone in the Catholic Church that the law needs to change around any of this at all. What it's saying is that the Catholic Church doesn't agree.
Ironic about this is that we're not going to Julian and Martin and saying, you know, like what you're doing is wrong. We don't, like, if they want to, they can do whatever they want to do, like, and there's nothing we can do about it. It's certainly legal or whatever, and they're grown adults. The thing that we're drawing attention to is them making a public profession and contradictory to the doctrine of the faith, and saying that this is acceptable and this is the way that the church should be, and putting it on the internet.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for saying that, because I think that's the heart of this issue. You know, do I hate gay people? Do you hate gay people? No. I don't know all the gay people in the world, so how do I know if I hate them or not? But as a Christian, I don't hate people. Do you wish them all to be driven out by mass genocide and suicide? No. The answer is an emphatic no. So they're just silly things to raise. However, as you've just said, you are free to live your life as you choose to live it. What you are not free to do, we may approve or disapprove individually, but what you are not free to do, as far as I can see, is say, because I choose to live this way, an institution, an organism founded by Christ must change to affirm the way I've chosen to live. That's the point. The point is not hatred. The point is not go and beat up a person who's homosexual or experiences same-sex attraction. I hope and know that all three of us, if we saw anyone mistreating somebody because of their sexuality, would step in to prevent that. Absolutely. But as you said earlier, Mark, we try homosexual, heterosexual, goodness knows what other desires we have to put God at the center of our lives. And when we fail, as we all do, we get on our knees and we ask for God's grace to help us get back up again. What we don't and shouldn't do is to celebrate that sin. That's the issue. This is not an issue of hating gay people or wanting them to end their lives. So I think you've absolutely summed it up brilliantly there. Thanks, Mark.
I mean, if I may, that's a good point at which just to mention the catechism again, which, like all good theologians, I have open on my desk.
Brilliant.
So those who have deep-seated homosexual tendencies, they must be accepted with respect, compassion and sensitivity. Every sign of unjust discrimination in their regard should be avoided. Now,
Right.
what happens in the celebrate everything paradigm is that unjust discrimination includes things like full access to the sacraments, including the sacrament of matrimony and that kind of thing. And that's not what unjust discrimination there means. Things like employment, laws and goods of the secular worldly world. I have to nuance that a bit, because the debate around same-sex marriage, which we're probably all old enough to remember, I mean, the students I teach think this is like a million years ago, but I remember it quite well. And that was under Bennett XVI. So there was actually quite a robust response from the church then, was arguing that the secular definition of marriage had to remain one man and one woman, because from the Catholic perspective, on natural law grounds, this is a good, transparent to reason, binding upon all. But also from the secular world, the empirical evidence would suggest that a child growing up in a stable married context of one man and one woman has better outcomes. So there was really good kind of secular grounds to make that case. But that was in no way saying that getting involved in what people, two consenting adults do in private in our society, that's not a discussion. That's not under discussion really. It's just that people shouldn't be treated differently in the secular or worldly sphere or unfairly discriminated against. But that there is a Catholic vision of sexuality in which participation in the sacrament, which is dependent participation in the full sacramental economy.
Yeah, so the church doesn't impose, it proposes. And the church here is proposing a better way of life, which is what the three of us believe, and, millions of Catholics throughout the world. And I think that you have to have that other option, because, a lot of people that I know who are same-sex attracted are not very happy with their lot. And I think we all, we can all remember, certainly in the 70s, what was that song? Smile If You're Glad to Be Gay. Do you remember that song? Which was like painting that rather a sorry picture of the experience of a same-sex attracted person. And I think that is a common sort of narrative. And really what the church is doing is offering an alternative and saying, look, you're not confined to your sexual desires. You are a child of God who's loved and valued without limits. And so, come and be a part of. And the other thing I often think about with this is, like, it's akin to what Katherine was saying earlier, about the argument that is, well, you're denying me, the right to have sex with other men or whatever, as if that is as if that is a pre-given, thing that you. But I know people who are single for their whole lives. Some people don't ever meet someone. They don't ever have a sexual partner. That doesn't mean that they're of any less value you know, we exclude all of that reality. And the same for married people. We're called to continence as well, aren't we?
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
like we might love like ladies or whatever, but I'm always trying to put this in. It's not down the pub, so I'm trying to put it in gentle terms.
We've all been down the pub with you, Mark.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
So
you know what I'd say, but like fundamentally, you know, you see some people who do have affairs and get involved in pornography, and that's destructive in their lives, and the church is offering something alternative. You might not think it's destructive. You might be fine. That's your choice. But we're saying...
the church offers medicine. You know, it's not just offering you a better way. It's saying when you fall, we'll be here. But we have to recognise that is a fall, and it's a fall that we can all have and do all have, not just gay people. I don't even like saying gay people, but, you know, in common parlance, gay people. And I was talking to you before the show began. You know, my father and mother-in-law celebrated their 60th wedding anniversary. They're in their 90s. She's since died, and he nursed her through her final years. He was faithful to her through life. And you think, is it likely that over 50 or 60 years he never looked at another woman and found her attractive and possibly had the thought that he wanted to have sex with another woman? I think it's highly likely that he did. But then he had to make a choice, as all heterosexual men do, as all married heterosexual men do. It's all about choice, and it takes away, I think all of this, it's like it reduces us to the beast who's incapable of making choices, who's incapable of asserting our will. It's like, yeah, I've said this before, we can breathe, my dog can breathe, I can have sex, my dog can have sex, I can eat food, my dog can eat food. We're all the same thus far, but the point of difference is I can make choices, and I can choose to will the good of the other in love. And that calls something out of me, out of all of us. And if we just sell people this nothing better than the beast, because you feel it, go for it. Because it feels like something you want to do it. You go, girl. It's like, it's so undignified. It doesn't recognize their true humanity, I think.
No, that's beautifully said. And it reminds me, actually, there's a brilliant bit in, I don't know if you've ever read that, Jacob, Rabbi Sax's The Great Partnership.
Oh, yeah.
But there's a brilliant bit in that where, you know, he talks about marriage as sacramentalizing, you know, that's what it does, human relationships, that it gives it incredible dignity and calls you to behave in a better way. And that's what we're saying, is that you don't have to act like animals. It's crazy that we've sort of devolved to this point in our society where we've almost come full circle where that has to be explained. But, you know, in that book, Sachs, like, it says that the greatest point of human civilization was the Renaissance, really, you know, where we had beauty and invention and moral standing, and that, you know, that we've been on kind of a downward trend from that point. So, you know, I just think that that's what we have to remember, is goodness, truth and beauty should be the focus of all of our lives. And we all struggle with temptation and desire and all those things. But, you know, as someone who's in an extremely happy, engaging, fruitful, wonderful marriage, it's the best thing in the world. You know, if you get that, it's the best thing in the world.
Yeah, and it's really good to keep that positive message, which is there. You know, you can say to the young man who's a Lothario or his female equivalent that what's on offer is remarkable and beautiful, and will unfold layer after layer of truth, goodness and beauty. And it might seem like a limitation on your freedom, but it's exactly the opposite, really. And I mean, I've got lots of married men who are friends who are Catholic, and, you know, chastity is a recurring theme, and it can, you know, struggles with chastity can be very subtle, losing custody of the eyes down the pub, you know, or they can be more grave, you know, involving adultery or whatever. But, you know, we're all called to be chaste in the way appropriate to our state of life. And for some people, this is the ultimate sacrifice in a sense, and the incredibly profound reserving of one's heart and desire for God alone, you know, through celibate chastity. And that's it's not it's not put there as some kind of torture or anything like that. It's put there as a remarkable and beautiful calling for those who are able to give of themselves and accepting the life God's called them to live. And I know a huge number of celibate people, as I'm sure you do as well, being in the Catholic Church. And I've never heard anyone say that this is, really, really difficult, and I'm really, really struggling, and all the rest of it. It does bring crosses, and we see the witness of when people fall. But I know so many happy and fulfilled individuals who have made very difficult decisions about the way in which they express their human sexual desire. And the idea that you could detract from that by not accepting the existence of a cross is a problem, and a problem for those people you mentioned who are really on the front line of this with this particular issue.
Yeah, what a remarkably holy and saintly thing to do, to struggle with that cross and to offer it up and to live joyfully in hope, walking with God. That is so far from saying we hate people. I really love Pope Benedict's be indulgent with the sinner, indulgent but intransigent with sin. It simply comes back to having to separate those two. And in that mass, what we saw was an attempt to conflate the two, to say, if you criticize the sin, you're criticizing the sinner. We don't want to criticize the sinner, so we can't criticize the sin. And that can't be a path to holiness. It simply can't be, irrespective of whatever cross we're carrying. Can I just, a couple more things before you go. One is, look, we've been talking about this as a celebration of a 50-year partnership of a same-sex couple. In their defense, we know this has already come out. Some of the clergy are saying, but all we were doing was celebrating a friendship. What's the harm in friendship? Does that line fly, Dr. Jacob?
Oh, the other one, it's got bells on.
I mean, to some extent, I don't know what my heterosexual friends are doing in the bedroom. We don't go around asking people. So, of course, you can say this is a friendship. What should make us suspicious of that?
Well, I think that, there's the danger of scandal in the sort of technical term, insofar as you're presenting to the world the view that this would appear the same as the nuptial union between a man and a woman, because you're treating it the same way, and you're giving it a kind of sacramental gloss. If these are two individuals who have, through heartfelt prayer, decided to live as brothers, then that's a pastoral matter between them and their priests. But the public celebration of it is clearly with the narrative of progress at the beginning. It didn't seem to be geared around that kind of thinking, as far as I could tell. The language of friendship, I am very uneasy with this coming into the debate, because friendship's a beautiful thing. And one of the things that makes friendship a beautiful thing is that it doesn't involve sexual desire. And when it does involve sexual desire, it becomes something different. And I think muddying that water is a big problem, actually. Now, what's happened, because the nature of the discussion around this in recent years has changed. Originally, when it first was subjected to full kind of critique by people within the church after the council, people were quoting scholars of the Bible who were saying that passages like the famous verse in Romans where Paul condemns homosexuality were a cultural residue from that society, and we live in a different society now, we know better. But that kind of argument ended up not working, because it was also used for the ordination of women. And JP2 in his encyclical on this issue pointed out that Jesus spent the whole night in prayer before choosing to ordain 12 men. It wasn't a cultural accident. He chose these people specifically. And that also knocked out the homosexuality argument as well, on the basis of cultural difference across time. Then people use the psychological arguments that it's so deep-seated and it's there with people forever, and et cetera, it's there from their earliest memories. But the Catechism does acknowledge that, whilst also saying it cannot be approved within the structures of Catholic teaching. So what you have in true continuity, if you like, with the Francis pontificate was a change of language. So there's no, you move from actually taking the doctrine head on and arguing against it on the basis of Bible or experience or tradition, and you just start calling it different things. And I think it's a problem for friendship, because friendship's beautiful. Friendship's in the Bible. The friendship between David and Jonathan, for example. Jesus calls the disciples friends. And coincidentally, the reason that gay men weren't allowed in the military originally was because the way a military unit works is on the basis of friendship and protecting your friends. That's the kind of core glue that gels the thing together. And it was felt that if there were romantic desires flying around, that would all change, because you have preferential treatment and people behaving irrationally and all the other stuff that goes on when there's romantic desire around. So that's why it was just to preserve the friendships that they said we can't have gay men in here, because then there'll be a confusion of friendship. So, you know, we're not talking about friendship, because friendship as a category doesn't include sexual desire, and calling it friendship and saying we're just blessing a friendship and doing that publicly is, to me, to completely muddy the waters. And it also it makes it very difficult to speak against it. It puts the people speaking against it in a position where they're condemning friendship between two, you know, old men or whatever, and that's just really not what this is about. I think it's really unhelpful, and I think it's slippery
and disingenuous. I think it's disingenuous.
It is disingenuous. Yeah.
Well, especially given that we know who these people are. You know, they've been engaged in the movement to try and overthrow church teaching on this issue for decades and decades. They're public figures. So,
yeah. And Mark, on that, just I have a question for you, Mark, and also your comments, Jacob. The video has since been taken down. So we did our commentary video. We covered the Mass of Thanksgiving, and it had more views than any other that they've put out, and it's now been taken down. And you were saying something before we began, Mark, about how there's a certain kind of, why was it up there in the first place? There's a certain sort of pride that you feel like you're in your own little network and everyone thinks the same as you, but then it's exposed to the light. Can you tell us why you think it's been taken down and what we can learn from this?
Well, I can only surmise, but my experience is that this is far more prevalent in the church than we think, and it's part of an old network. I mean, a call to action, you know, these sort of groups, which are all of this age group. We've got the Root and Branch Synod and in Clifton and all this sort of thing going on. And this is all part of that movement. There are, if you look at, there was a sort of like a synod, I suppose, in 1980 in Liverpool Archdiocese, that was orchestrated by Archbishop Warlock, and it was pushing all these exact same issues. And really, under JP2 and under Benedict XVI, we saw these things start to be dealt with in a theological, you know, way, through writing encyclicals, you know, dealing with the philosophy, the psychology, you know, examining it in an objective way and applying theology to it. And under Francis, then, we lost our bearings completely. As you said, Jacob, he started using all kinds of different language. And I think that what happens is that I mean, just look how affirmed these men were with the fact that there were two bishops, a canon of Westminster Cathedral. This is mainstream. You know, I couldn't get a cardinal to come if I was to celebrate my marriage to Louise. It just wouldn't happen. Probably as a result of this channel as much as anything else.
You're not going to get anyone, Mark.
Problems. So what you tend to find is they're extremely confident. They, you know, and I've confronted people, not this particular couple, but I've confronted other people in the church, not in an aggressive way, but just to say, okay, explain it to me. Explain why the church teaches this, but you're saying that. You know, can you explain what it is? And they can't. And what they say is things like, oh, it's more complicated than that in reality, though, isn't it? And, you know, you're like, well, please explain to me how it's more complicated, because I can take it. I'm a big boy, you know, and I'm interested in someone explaining to me. And the reality is that they can't. What they're doing is they want their sin condoned. They are acting in a way that's contradictory to the church, and they want that to be approved of. And so they've built a little network, and they feel very comfortable and affirmed. And, you know, like Julian Filichowski was the director of CAFOD for 21 years. So it's not like they've been in plain sight for decades and decades. And it's when they do something like this, and I think because of the growth in evangelization through the Francis years like this, through social media and stuff like that, now we're able to shine a light on it. And when you do, they're exposed and they scurry back under the rock that they came from, because they know that the reality is that what they're doing is directly problematic. And so they
even though they present everything as brave battlers for justice. You know, everything is about justice and how they fought for justice and courage. And you think you'd have more, I feel that you'd have at least more respect for them if they just kept it up and said, we've put it up, we're proud of it.
We believe in this.
Yeah, we believe in this. We are pushing for this. So to take it down, to me, seemed an odd thing to do. Either you're proud of this or you know that this is actually in contradiction to the church and it's become a problem, but only because more eyes have seen it outside of your small circle. Exactly. It's an odd, I don't know what you think, Jacob, or I don't want to put you on the spot, but did you find it odd that it was taken down, or what are your thoughts on?
Yeah, I didn't know it'd been taken down until we started the video, but yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the things that was there in the service, I can't remember which point, there was discussion of fear as driving non-inclusion. Yeah. And what that's doing is taking language from the civil rights movement around race, and obviously racism is an appalling evil. Taking that language and applying it to other identities, and with this sense of deep-seated homosexual tendencies being with people from birth, it becomes a characteristic equivalent to race. But it's actually not. It's different, and there's nothing in the catechism to suggest otherwise. And what the younger generation have experienced is the trans phenomenon, which, by the way, people are not really identifying as trans teenagers in the way that they were 5 years ago. That seems to have sort of moved on a bit in this country, at least. Yeah, and people have seen that actually you can't take that civil rights movement language and apply it to any identity. It doesn't work. So there's a lot more questioning around this among the young. That generation haven't done that questioning. They're using that kind of civil rights language. But okay, if this is like the civil rights movement, can you imagine one of the great fighters against the injustices experienced during the civil rights crises of the 1960s withdrawing and taking it all back once they'd got some public attention? It'd be an incredibly unacceptable and cowardly thing to do, because they'd be fighting for an unequivocal moral right. So it's interesting. It's interesting that happened.
One more thing that I wanted to talk to you about while we had you on is the teleology of this. And this might be a bit controversial, and it's a bit more psychological, philosophical, but it seems to me that you know, part of the problem, when you hear people say you're stopping me from expressing my sexual, you know, whatever, they're longing for the natural ends of sexual intimacy, which is procreative. Whether that's subconsciously, you know, the point I'm making is, can that ever be fulfilling? And therefore, is it ultimately problematic? And you could say the same thing about masturbation or anything that's sterile in that way, that in some way it's not fulfilling its telos. Do you see what I'm saying, Jacob?
Yeah.
And that makes it inherently problematic for the individual, because you're constantly yearning for the new life that your body is trying to generate through that act,
and keep seeking it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way to sublimate it and express it appropriately is through things like bearing spiritual fruit and becoming a spiritual father or mother to others, that kind of thing, which can be done in a state of a single life or in a celibate life or even within a married life. That can be where you find the outlet later in life. But trying to fulfill it in the physical route from within the Catholic purview, I don't see how we can't end up in the situation that you describe. I was going to say something else, but I've forgotten it now.
On the celibacy issue, I was going to say Father Pascal, who does our little gospel reflections every day on Catholic Unscripted, I had a chat with him about this issue during the week, and really beautifully, he said to me, so he's in his mid-30s, a very virile man, with loads of energy and enthusiasm for the faith. And he said to me, he looked me straight in the eyes and he said, you can be celibate. It's not that difficult, And I just thought, thank God for you, thank God for our priests. And this is biblical, isn't it? Yeah.
But I've spoken to priests. So, sorry, Mark. I was just going to echo what you've said. I've spoken to priest friends, good, holy priests, who have said similarly that it's like a fire. It's like stoking a fire. Actually, if you, I suppose, develop good habits and you avoid occasions of sin and so on, then it actually becomes easier. It's like if you think of any addiction, alcohol.
Theosis, doesn't it?
Yeah. if you find it very hard at first, not to have a drink. But if time goes by, it becomes easier to achieve that virtue, to live in a virtuous life. And we live in a culture that makes it very hard, because there's pornography everywhere. There's films with dirty scenes in them and everything, sex selling products to us. And like you say, psychologists saying you're going to be ill if you don't live out your fantasy and your desire. And so to be in that culture, that's why I'm so impressed with those who can do it and say they're saintly, like Father Pascal and others, who are so saintly to be able to live that way and to just not stoke that fire.
Yeah, and to turn that into reverse as well. I mean, it's we know from neuroscience the evidence of those who engage with pornography regularly, that they need more and more extreme content in order to get the same kick out of it. I mean, that's been proven neuroscientifically, and it ends in unspeakable levels of degradation, which someone would never have thought of viewing, years previously to getting into that position. So, and I think related to this kind of distantly, there's also this fact that, we live in the most accepting society probably in human history of different ways of expressing sexual desire. We're probably in the most gay friendly, living in London, probably one of the most gay friendly places that has ever existed. And yet there are those who are determined to make the Catholic Church change its view or practice on this issue. You've got a religious minority that have decided to maintain their original position on this, and others make it their life's mission to make the Catholic Church change its mind. But you can live any lifestyle you want almost in contemporary London. And there are Christian denominations out there which will open the doors and welcome you in ways that you wouldn't believe. But yet it seems sometimes that people single out the one little bit that's still saying the view of human sexuality, which did dominate Western societies for many centuries, and saying you have to change. And I find that very curious as well, because, you can go forth and do whatever you want, but all we're saying is that you can't do it and be Catholic.
Yeah.
Or you can't do it pridefully and celebrate it as core to your Catholic identity. And that's what it means to say honoured, which was one of the words that was used. It can't be honoured in the Catholic Church.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no more than adultery or masturbation or anything else can be honoured. It's recognised as reality, and everyone struggles with it, but it's not honoured. I think that's brilliant. That's a brilliant summary. I was just thinking. I know we're going to close now. I was just thinking of Milo Yiannopoulos. He's a very controversial figure, and he's kind of wacky, but he's a very interesting person to speak to. Especially, he's become Catholic recently, and he talks about this lifestyle and very much speaks about how prevalent it is, how prolific it is, and the places it takes you, the holes that you fall into. And I think he's hopefully we can try and speak with him, Mark, because he's quite a powerful speaker coming from that experience and saying, the things that we probably can't say. So a final word, Jacob. People, you mentioned earlier, dealing with this in the workplace, it remains very difficult. How does one, if you've got a soundbite, how does one manage to be authentically Orthodox Catholic, holding fast to the teachings of their faith, and work in a modern day workplace where you have to celebrate homosexuality, really?
Well, I'm really bad at remembering the scriptural chapter and verse, but somewhere it says, always be ready to have an answer for the hope you carry in you.
1 Peter 3:15.
That's the one. I was just thinking that. I've had a long Substack post pointing out that I said Gregory the 7th when I meant Gregory the 14th.
Catholics.
Yeah. So I did say, look, I'm really bad with numbers and stuff like that. So yes, thank you. And I think that's the answer. I think it's being ready to give a sober answer. When you're questioned about the hope you have in you, there will be points at which you have to draw the line, and it might be a rainbow lanyard. It might be something other than that. It's being poised always and being confident in yourself through prayer to be able to articulate the beauty and love and joy and genuine divine acceptance which is on offer in the Catholic Church.
Amen. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Jacob Phillips, for joining us, for taking the time to go through this video that has caused a lot of feeling, a lot of intense emotion on both sides. And we hope that you can see that this is done in love, we don't hate anyone, but we also recognise the beauty, the truth and the goodness of our faith, and try to live it and know that that is the best calling for all of us. We hope to talk with you again soon, Jacob, but for now, thanks very much. God
Good
bless.
to see you. Thanks for having me on.